Hello and welcome to What the Just Happened Today, your essential guide to the daily shock and awe in national politics. I'm Joe Amditis. Let's get to it. It's Wednesday, March 31st, 2021. Welcome to Day 71. Joe Biden unveiled his $2.25 trillion jobs, infrastructure, and green energy proposal to help reshape the U.S. economy. Over the next 8 years, the plan would rebuild 20,000 miles of roads, repair 10 of the most economically important bridges in the country, eliminate lead pipes from the nation's water supply, update and modernize the electrical grid, fund the construction of about 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations, and expand high-speed broadband access across the country, as well as upgrade and build new schools and more. The White House said the spending would generate millions of new jobs as the country shifts away from fossil fuels and accelerates the fight against climate change. The White House also said the proposal would pay for itself over the next 15 years by raising the corporate tax rate to 28%, increasing the global minimum tax paid to 21%, ending federal tax breaks for fossil fuel companies, and ramping up tax enforcement. Nancy Pelosi says she wants to have the House pass the package by the 4th of July. Meanwhile, the Pentagon reversed Trump-era policies that banned transgender people from serving in the military. The new department policies will allow transgender people who meet military standards to enlist and serve openly in their self-identified gender, and they will be able to get medically necessary transition-related care authorized by law. Biden also issued his first presidential proclamation to formally celebrate Transgender Day of Visibility, an international day to commemorate trans lives and accomplishments. Biden said that despite the hard-fought progress for transgender and gender nonconforming people to live openly and authentically, trans people still face systemic barriers to freedom and equality, such as higher rates of violence, harassment, and discrimination. Moving on, COVID-19 was the third leading cause of death in the United States in 2020, just behind heart disease and cancer. More than 3.3 million deaths were reported in the U.S. last year, a 15.9% increase from 2019. Meanwhile, the House Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Crisis, which is reviewing the federal response to COVID-19, obtained documents that showed the Trump administration pursued a haphazard and ineffective approach to procurement of personal protective equipment and medical supplies at the start of the pandemic. Specifically, Peter Navarro, who served as Trump's trade advisor, warned Trump on March 1, 2020, to acquire medical supplies and invest in coronavirus tests and other supplies to fight the virus, according to a memo. After Trump ignored Navarro's recommendations, he pursued his own strategy to acquire supplies, committing more than $1 billion in federal funds with little oversight, which has since prompted multiple probes by multiple congressional committees. Back in D.C., the Biden administration dismissed more than 40 outside experts at the EPA who were appointed by Trump. EPA Administrator Michael Regan said the decision to oust researchers with the Science Advisory Board and the Clean Air Scientific Advisory Committee was necessary to ensure the agency receives the best possible scientific insight. Meanwhile, the intelligence community says Russian hackers stole thousands of State Department officials' emails last year. A previously unreported breach revealed that the Russians accessed emails in the department's Bureau of European and Eurasian Affairs and the Bureau of East Asian and Pacific Affairs. While it's unclear whether the hack of the State Department emails was part of the SolarWinds espionage campaign, it does not appear that the classified network was accessed. Moving on, 2 Capitol police officers sued Trump for the physical and emotional injuries they suffered as a result of the January 6 Capitol riot. In the lawsuit, James Blasingame and Sidney Hemby accused Trump of inciting the violent mob with baseless claims of voter fraud and claims that Democrats were trying to steal the election. About 140 D.C. and Capitol police officers were injured during the attacks, and 2 officers who were on duty at the Capitol later died by suicide. Meanwhile, a federal judge ruled that a non-disclosure agreement that Trump's 2016 presidential campaign required employees to sign was invalid and unenforceable. Jessica Denson, who had worked on Trump's campaign as a phone bank supervisor and Hispanic outreach coordinator, claimed that she was the target of abusive treatment and sexual harassment. The Trump campaign later won a $50,000 award against Denson for violating the non-disparagement agreement. Denson then sued on behalf of herself and other Trump campaign aides who had been forced to sign confidentiality agreements, asking that they be invalidated as too broad and illegal in New York because they lasted indefinitely. Prosecutors working for the Manhattan District Attorney subpoenaed the personal bank records of the Trump Organization's chief financial officer and are scrutinizing gifts that he received from Trump. While Alan Weisselberg has not been accused of any wrongdoing, the effort appears to be an attempt to gain his cooperation to help prosecutors understand the inner workings of the company. Prosecutors are also examining whether Trump and the company manipulated property values in order to obtain loans and tax benefits. And finally, the Justice Department is investigating whether Representative Matt Gaetz had a sexual relationship with a 17-year-old and violated federal sex trafficking laws by paying her to travel with him. Attorney General William Barr opened the investigation in the final months of the Trump administration. Trump and several senior Justice Department officials were notified of the investigation. Gaetz called the investigation part of a scheme involving false sex allegations in order to extort his family for $25 million, adding that he and his father, Don Gaetz, have been cooperating with the FBI by wearing a wire. Gaetz, meanwhile, has privately told confidants that he's considering not seeking re-election and possibly leaving Congress early for a job at Newsmax. That's all for now. You can find the links and sources for all of these stories on the main website. And as always, visit whatthefuckjusthappenedtoday.com for the latest news and headlines. Until next time, I'm Joe Amditas.